Hello. This case took place right in the heart of a bustling city, where thousands of people come and go day and night. What's particularly unusual is that over the course of 7 years, 3 bodies were hidden under a sewer, completely unbeknownst to anyone until a flood in the area revealed them. This story is truly mysterious. How could the perpetrator manage to transport 3 bodies under a sewer lid, with people constantly passing by above day and night, without anyone noticing or suspecting anything? All the mysteries will be answered in today's video. Hello, I'm Joe, and welcome to Chinese Crimes, a channel dedicated to real-life crime stories in China. In March 2011, during the annual rainy season, sewer blockage became a significant issue. At a drainage sewer in the old residential area of Chahua Lane, Dusheng City, Chengdu Province, people noticed that wastewater was stagnant, causing flooding in the residential entrance. It seemed that the drain was blocked by something. Wastewater not only couldn't be discharged, but also emitted a foul odor from the sewer, greatly upsetting the residents. This residential area was located near a bustling tea house, frequented by many. The tea house even stayed open late into the night and hosted lively birthday parties. Residents suspected that the tea house owner might have poured tea waste down the drain, causing the blockage. Residents gathered outside the tea house to talk to the owner and find a solution. The owner wasn't sure if it was his fault or not, and to avoid business disruptions, he took money out of his own pocket to hire 2 plumbers to help clear the drain. When the plumbers arrived, they were also very diligent and began working. But what they didn't expect was that when the sewer lid was opened, they saw a human shin bone. This sight horrified everyone present, prompting them to immediately call the police. The police quickly arrived at the scene. The first thing they did when they got there was to climb down into the sewer to inspect. When they pulled it up, they found a body, although severely decomposed and reduced to just bones. It seemed that this person had been dead for a long time. The police also found some clothing near the body. With the scene as it was highly likely a murder case, and the perpetrator had brought the bodies down into the sewer. Impossible for it to be a case of suicide inside such a horrific place, and then closing the sewer lid. The forensic doctor quickly arrived at the scene to conduct an examination. The forensic examination concluded that there were no clear wounds on the victim's body, and that the skeleton belonged to a woman who had been dead for over 2 years. Due to the body being submerged in dirty water and exposed to complex heat from the sun, the exact time of the murder couldn't be identified. It could only be estimated to be over 2 years ago, based on the age of the victim's bones, around 18 years old when she died. However, the police couldn't determine the identity of this person because the murder had happened a long time ago. There were no blood or fingerprints at the scene, and there were no personal documents that matched any person's cases at the time. There was something strange. The drainage sewer was located at the only entrance and exit of the neighborhood, where there was a high flow of people and vehicles both day and night. How could the perpetrator commit murder and discard the bodies in this area without anyone noticing anything unusual over time? If someone had hidden a dead body here, surely someone would have seen to find more clues. The police decided to use a water pump to drain all the wastewater from the sewer. Then they went down into the sewer to search for any useful clues. During further investigation at the scene, the police found a very important clue. This sewer was located near the residential area and was well protected. It's worth noting that there was a sewer lid inside the security guard's room, just a few steps away. To prevent the foul odor from the septic tank below, 2 layers of partition walls were used in the room, creating a large space between the sewer opening and the security room. The police realized that this could be an ideal route to commit a murder and conceal the evidence of the dead bodies. Compared to the main road through the crowded area, this sewer passage was less known. Therefore, the police decided to investigate the history of those who had used the security room before. According to residents in the area, the security room used to have security guards, but due to financial reasons, they couldn't afford to pay the salaries anymore, so they stopped hiring security guards. Because this is a low-income neighborhood, the security guards changed frequently. However, due to the lack of commitment to the job, the security guards didn't remember much about each other. When the police checked the security room, they found it had been left empty for a long time and was filled with dusty knickknacks. Around the sewer lid, there was evidence of cement plastering. This puzzled both the police and the residents, as there was no logical reason to seal a manhole cover with cement. It seemed like there was a secret being concealed. The police decided to break the layer of cement and open the sewer lid. Immediately, a horrendous stench filled the air, and they were shocked to find 2 sets of rounded skeletons inside, still retaining their shapes. According to general information, bodies usually stiffen within 2 to 6 hours of death. But in this case, the police concluded that the security room could be the primary crime scene. After forensic investigation, the 3 bodies were identified as females, aged 16, 18, and 38. This raised questions about the similarity between the victims, as they didn't share the same age. However, there was no information about the identities of the victims throughout the investigation, making the investigation very difficult. Shock and horror filled everyone's mind as the police thought about the time frame when the crime might have occurred. The police asked residents if there was anything unusual, but everyone replied that nothing was out of the ordinary. To solve the case, identifying the identities of the 3 victims was crucial. The police publicized information about the case throughout the city and proposed a reward for anyone providing useful information. Shortly after, a man reported that his wife, Tai Ping, had been missing for 5 years. On June 23, 2006, this man went to Ducheng to meet his wife as planned. However, after arriving, he couldn't contact his wife despite calling multiple times. He went to the house his wife rented and waited, but she didn't return after 3 days. He didn't know what went wrong and couldn't reach her, so he decided to return to his hometown. Afterwards, the husband went to Ducheng several times to search for his wife, but without success. Finally, he gave up and assumed his wife had left him for another man. Not wanting to suffer, he didn't report his wife's disappearance. After 5 years without a trace of his wife, the man happened to read a police notice. His heart sank with undescribable feelings, and he decided to call the hotline to provide information. The police, upon hearing this, immediately asked personal questions about Tai Ping and felt that from the time of her disappearance, Tai Ping might be related to the case. The police then proceeded to obtain DNA samples from Tai Ping's parents, and the comparison results confirmed that the female body over 30 years old was indeed Tai Ping. During the investigation, they collected information about those who had lived in the security room, including construction workers and the manager of a nearby internet cafe, as well as the gate security staff of the residential area. First, the construction workers group was scrutinized because most of them often worked in teams, making it difficult for the perpetrator to attack and kill 3 people at once. However, The internet cafe manager, who had lived in the security room, had no criminal record and showed no signs of abnormality when questioned by the police. Just when the case seemed to be at a standstill, an elderly woman from the area came to the police station and provided information based on what she had heard. A few years ago, there was an old man working as a security guard there, but he wasn't trustworthy. She heard that he had committed rape and had served a prison sentence. Furthermore, he had a volatile temper and occasionally caused trouble with residents in the area. He always stayed alone in the security room. One day, she suddenly saw a young girl in the security room. She asked him about this girl, and he said she was his granddaughter, who had just graduated and come here to work temporarily and didn't have a place to stay, so she stayed temporarily in the security room with him. However, she didn't believe that this girl was his granddaughter because the two didn't resemble each other in any way. This girl, just by looking at her clothes and behavior, didn't seem like someone from an educated family. At that point, the old lady thought of these two and a special relationship but didn't say anything further. After a while, when she saw the young girl leaving, he said that his granddaughter had found a job and rented a room. However, not long after, another girl came who looked younger than the previous one. The security guard again said that this was his granddaughter, the youngest son's child. However, this time, the old lady was also sure that the two were not related. After hearing the old lady's story about this man, the police decided to investigate the information and found that his name was Hung Fat, 61 years old, who had been imprisoned for rape. Others in the area also said that they had seen women entering and leaving the security room at night and suspected that they were prostitutes. The investigation has now shifted to the security guard, who has been hired as a security guard since 2003 and has been living alone in the security room. Some girls also lived with him, at an age equivalent to the victims found under the sewer. Another detail: in 2008, Hung Fat suddenly disappeared along with 3,000 yuan of electricity and water bills he'd collected from residents in the area. This further reinforced suspicion about Hung Fat. The police immediately investigated his whereabouts, but Hung Fat had left the area for almost 3 years, and no one knew where he was. For these reasons, the police identified Hung Fat as the main suspect in this case. Subsequently, law enforcement agencies focused their efforts on tracking down the suspect. It didn't take long for them to discover that Hung Fat had rented a house at the Ducheng bus station and lived a simple life, not leaving the area recently. The police quickly arrested him and brought him in for questioning. Surprisingly, Hung Fat immediately confessed that he was the one who committed the 3 murders. He also admitted to having a special relationship with all 3 victims. From his confession, the police identified the first victim as Tai Ping, 38 years old. In addition, the other 2 victims were also identified as Zhang Li, 18 years old, from Chongqing, and Tang Yan, 16-year-old, from Yunnan. According to the murderer's confession, Hung Fat accidentally met Zhang Li in 2004, and she was the first person he killed. Zhang Li worked as a waitress at a nearby restaurant. One day while she was working, she accidentally cut her hand. She went to Hung Fat's security room and asked him for some white wine to disinfect the wound. Hung Fat complied by giving her some wine. Initially, that was all, and Hung Fat didn't pay much attention. However, to his surprise, Zhang Li came to him later and wanted to borrow about 50 yuan. According to Hung Fat, Zhang Li implied that if he was willing to lend her the money, she would accept any condition he set. Hung Fat had long had no relationship with women. Seeing Zhang Li young and beautiful, he had evil intentions. He proposed that Zhang Li live with him at night, and to his surprise, Zhang Li agreed. Hung Fat immediately provided her with identity papers to prove her identity, but he also feared that Zhang Li would not come as promised. Therefore, he said that if Zhang Li did not return tonight, he would go to the hot pot restaurant to find her and talk to her. That night, Zhang Li did come because she had nowhere else to go, and the two started living together. Zhang Li stayed in the security room with Hung Fat for several months. During this time, Zhang Li often asked to borrow money from Hung Fat, sometimes 30 or 50 yuan, and she said that if he didn't lend her, she wouldn't sleep with him at night. Initially, Hung Fat continued to give her money, but later, when he saw that Zhang Li had no intention of paying back, he didn't want to lend any more and said that she could find another place to live. When Zhang Li got angry and demanded her money back, asking Hung Fat to pay 1,000 yuan, she also said she would report to the police that Hung Fat had raped her. Hung Fat, who had been convicted of rape and lived a miserable life after losing his wife and children, could not accept this. He got angry and choked Zhang Li, causing her death. Hung Fat realized that he had killed someone, but because he had been a convicted criminal, he remained unusually calm. After a few minutes of thinking, evil thoughts suddenly appeared in Hung Fat's mind. He quickly found a way to escape, the drainage hole in the back room. Without hesitation, he took Zhang Li's body down the water pipe, followed the dark path to the sewer lid in the security room. After killing Zhang Li, Hung Fat didn't feel worried or scared. On the contrary, he continued to work as a security guard and sleep in the room. Just below were dead bodies. Strangely, no one in the neighborhood noticed anything unusual, except for an old lady who had seen something strange and paid attention to the young girl from before. A few months later, a girl named Tang Yan, 16 years old, came to the residential area at Chahua Lane to find her friend. She sat waiting in the security room, expecting her friend to arrive, but he never showed up. During this time, Hung Fat spotted Tang Yan and found her charming. He began to pretend to inquire and went to buy steamed buns for Tang Yan to eat, so she wouldn't go hungry. Hung Fat found the security guard to be friendly and kind-hearted. Gradually, the relationship between the two became more comfortable, and they began to open up to each other. Tang Yan lamented that she couldn't find a job because she was young and lacked experience. Upon hearing this, Hung Fat immediately suggested that Tang Yan come live with him and agreed to lend her money. Tang Yan heard and accepted the offer, and from then on, the two lived together. After a while, Tang Yan grew tired of life in this small room. She wanted to leave to find a better job and life. However, Hung Fat didn't want Tang Yan to leave and demanded that if she wanted to go, she had to pay back the living expenses incurred during this time. However, Tang Yan didn't have any money and decided to leave. Disagreements escalated into conflict, and in a fit of rage, Hung Fat again resorted to killing Tang Yan. He then hid the girl's body and continued to stay in the room as if nothing had happened. Just a year after the 2006 incident, Hung Fat massacred Tang Yan, and he still hid in that horrifying house. No one in the neighborhood could suspect that beneath Hung Fat's room, 2 dead bodies were hidden, and this demon continued to live and act without arousing suspicion. Everything continues. Taiping rented a small apartment in the neighborhood and often met Hung Fat when coming and going. Gradually, they became acquainted with each other. Because her husband was in the countryside, Taiping, a single woman, felt lonely, so she started a relationship with Hung Fat. Every night, she would go to Hung Fat's security room to spend the night. Hung Fat, captivated by the allure of an older woman, couldn't stay away from Taiping. But one day, Taiping told Hung Fat that the two couldn't continue this relationship anymore because her husband was coming back. However, Hung Fat refused to let go and demanded that Taiping continue to maintain a secret relationship with him. If not, he would reveal the matter to her husband. Taiping was angry at Hung Fat's persistence. She didn't want to continue living in this dangerous secret relationship and facing the risk from Hung Fat. She declared that if he dared to reveal this to her husband, she would report him for rape. As soon as she heard those two words, Hung Fat immediately strangled Taiping with both hands, not letting go until she stopped moving. He then disposed of Taiping's body into the water pipe and continued to live in that terrifying room with 3 corpses he had created. After that, the community decided not to hire security guards anymore, so Hung Fat couldn't continue to stay there to keep his horrific secret. Before leaving, he took more cement and sealed the well cover. Furthermore, he took the residents' electricity and water money, totaling more than 3,000 yuan before leaving the area. After being brought to trial, Hung Fat admitted his guilt and showed remorse, but that wasn't enough to forgive his heinous crimes. Hung Fat's actions constituted intentional homicide, and he was sentenced to death, stripped of political rights for life under the law. In 2012, Hung Fat was brought to court for trial. Who could have imagined that an old man over half a century old, who seemed frail, could be so cruel as to take another person's life like this? According to Hung Fat's account, the 3 deceased also led quite loose lifestyles. But that was the only one side of his claim, and there was no way to investigate the truthfulness, as the victims were all dead and couldn't testify. However, there were witnesses who'd said they'd seen 2 young victims living with Hung Fat in the security room, which partly confirmed his confession and the warning that this case brings. As for young single girls, this story serves as a reminder that they need to know how to protect themselves and avoid dangerous relationships. Because you never know when you might end up in a frightening situation like the 3 girls in this case. A seemingly kind and harmless old security guard turned out to be a serial killer. So, to ensure safety, remember not to create risks for yourself. And this is today's case. Do you have any thoughts you'd like to share? Leave a comment below. Chinese Crimes will continue to analyze real-life cases in China in the next video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video to support us. For now, goodbye and see you again.